she would just use that as a tool to keep me controlled. She would just put the tape in and press the button, and I would just stand there and babble and sing for hours and hours. And as a matter of fact, a few times when I was throwing temper tantrums, she recorded some of that too. And I do believe she still has those tapes, and she always threatens that she's going to pop those out someday and blackmail me. Because she used to hang on to them when we were young. She got one of me going off and swearing and hollering and throwing a temper tantrum, and that was like her little tool back then. She's like, yeah, well, I'm gonna play this for Dad. And ooh, you can't play it for Dad. So, yeah, so that was some of my earliest memories.
What are some of the musicians you actually played with? I mean, I know you're doing a lot of the singer-songwriter stuff, but I mean, are there any local musicians or local bands that are still kind of out there doing it and pretty prominent that people might know the names of?
Not that I know of.
Well, up in the Hilltowns, I know you did play with a different band. I forgot the name of that.
Oh, yeah, I played with, I sat in with the McLeod brothers once or twice. I had a couple of parties up there when I was living up in the hills.
There was a guitar player who's really avid guitar player now and still widely known. It was Steve Russell.
I played with Steve Russell, yeah. He was in Rock 201. I think he was even in Back in Black for a while, or one of those bands. He's been in multiple bands. I played with, Steve Russell, and a guy that probably nobody remembers anymore, a guy named Jim Hurley, was one of my childhood friends, and his father owned the Hurley Jazz Studio in Northampton, Mass. Phenomenal teacher, guitar player, so he kind of taught the kid every scale there was, and the kid kind of took and played heavy metal with it, and of course we got together, and that's what we were doing.
Before you and I met back in 1999, there was a prominent band that you were in that, you know, kind of got up there really well and played alongside a couple of different other bands. What was the name of that band?
It's a band called Oriphase.
And you were the drummer in that?
I was a drummer in that.
What kind of music was that?
Oh, it was really weird because there was so many different. It was a rock, I would say.
More like a rock alternative or punk rock?
Yeah, I would say, I heard lots of different things. I mean, it was only a 3-piece band. It was me, a singer, and a bass player. And they were both very young. I mean, they were 21. I was approaching 30. And the singer, he was really bent on the Nirvana sound and Nirvana sort of singing and songwriting. That was his gig. I was coming out of, listening to everything under the sun, from the Beatles to Jethro Tull to Metallica, and, I was really into, doing drum work and playing, really honing out drum skills. And I met these guys, and they're like, well, just hammer out a beat for us. And I'm like, this stuff sounded like, my God, I was like, wow. But, the kid had 150 songs he wrote. They were well structured. The bass player had gone to college for classical piano, and he was good, So I think between all of us fighting and arguing about our musical styles, we came up with some cool stuff in the mix of all the stuff that kind of sounded like Nirvana and whatnot. But we went pretty far. We went far enough to attract the attention of a major label.
What major label was that?
I think it was a subsidiary of Geffen or something, and they actually paid to do some stuff with us, and it got pretty wild for a while. We kind of went out and felt like we were famous for a bit.
What are a couple of the bands that you opened up for? Do you remember?
We opened the stage third opening band to Third Eye Blind, Our Lady Peace, people like that, these upcoming bands, and I do believe Rage Against the Machine in New York City once, but they were brand new, and
it's amazing because all three of those are signed.
They're all signed,
labels,
yeah, now exactly, But we didn't get the royal treatment where we, got to hang out and ride the bus. It was like, hey, if you guys want to take this spot and do that.
Well, did you ever get to meet them backstage?
Oh, yeah.
We go on their bus?
Oh, yeah, we got to meet those.
That must have been a heck of an experience.
That was pretty cool. But, being, at the age we were at and the mindset we were at and the sort of recreational things we were doing, too, it's really easy to kind of get lost in all that. And I think that's ultimately what ruined the band.
Do you think money was the problem, having too much of it at the time?
It was money. It was health. There was a health issue with a band member. There was drug addictions, heroin, and just all kinds of stuff. It was, people's attitudes. It was crazy, We were a bunch of young guys, without wives and girlfriends and tie downs and just living this wild life, and we were rubbing elbows with some really famous people, and it's really easy to go squirrely.
How long have you been clean?
Oh, me? Oh,
Yeah,
God, I don't know.
from all that.
Well, let's see. I've been with you now 16 years. I was clean when I met you.
So how long before that had happened?
I had made a conscious decision to quit everything and get pretty sober, like probably the year prior to that. So
Probably about 1998, 1997.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of people don't even know about some of the real dark things. But I'm the type of guy that I'm afraid to take an aspirin. But when I had the right poison that worked for me, I kind of went with it. And I liked my alcohol, and it can really tear you apart. But
Was it hard to quit all that?
yeah, not really. I think I had gotten to a point where it just wasn't, the bad was outweighing the good, you know. And
You just woke up and you just didn't feel like doing it because it made you feel sick? Or,
Pretty
I've
much.
never had an addiction myself.
Pretty
except
much,
for
yeah.
my coffee and maybe smoking cigarettes. I mean, I really, I guess I've never been there,
yeah, pretty much, kind of what it is. I mean, it's kind of like, well, I don't know, for anybody that does anything, well, think about it. Like, say if you're lactose intolerant, but you love milk and ice cream and whatnot. So once in a while you splurge and you eat it because it tastes so doggone good, and the next day you're dying,
all the symptoms, yeah.
And after a while, it got to be where the reaction from the action was just so bad. Like, I'd go out and I'd get tossed, on a Friday night or whatever, and then I'd be sick for all week, and and it wasn't a whole lot of fun. And the stupid stuff that I did and the situations I ran into while I was drinking and partying kind of caught up with it. And not to mention all the law stuff that came down with it too. You do stupid things when you're drinking,
Mm-hmm.
when you're drinking and messing around with stuff. So, and it's weird. I wake up every day now and I feel as if I'm a completely different person. It's like that was another life ago. I don't even really like to even talk about it sometimes, but you brought it up.
How many years did you live out there near Goshen, Chesterfield, Massachusetts?
Well, let's see. Moved out there in 1989. Moved out of there in, what was it? 98? 99.
So about 10 years?
That's all that was?
I believe so. But 10 years is a long time if you think about it.
89 to 90.
9 is 10 years.
Wow, it felt like it was forever.
You must have formed...
I've been telling people it was close to 17 or 20. It felt like it. Well, you know what it was? I was hanging out up there before.
A couple of years before that.
Yeah, I mean, I had always had friends out in Chesterfield, Goshen, Cummington. I was always, hanging out there.
So you made a lot of bonds and connections out there.
Oh, lifelong, yeah. And the funny thing is, too, is like, a lot of people I've been approached with, redneck. Where do you get this redneck thing, this northern redneck thing? Well, a lot of my bros out there and a lot of the things I did kind of fell into the lines.
More of a northern redneck.
Yeah, because
not redneck in the South.
some people call us hillbillies.
Redneck,
Oh, I was totally a
rednecks.
hillbilly. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to get really technical, yeah.
But when you say the word hillbilly, when you're trying to say your name in connotation to like a song or a show, it kind of doesn't mix as far as just the saying.
Well, it just seemed like the perfect little cliche thing to work out with, to work with. I mean, I lived like a redneck for all those years, and when I grew up in this little town here that I'm back in now, which is kind of weird. I kind of made a full circle because I was born and brought up right here in East Hampton, Massachusetts, but I lived on a side street.
On West Street, right?
Out of town, yeah. Actually, I could probably throw a stone hard enough and hit the house I grew up in, which is
From where we live now.
Exactly. And I kind of was a bit of an unusual sort. I had most of the kids were going down to the ballparks and playing ball and doing all that. Well, I was motorcycling, dirt biking, spending time in the woods. I was fishing, I was hunting, I was doing stuff like that.
Snowmobiling, too.
Snowmobiling.
Lots of snowmobile tracks.
My house was, on a side street away from town, and I had just acres and acres and acres of woods behind my house. So I kind of lived that sort of life, And
How many miles would you travel, like, per se on a snowmobile trail?
oh God, I don't even know. Maybe 40, 50. got even crazier up in the hill towns. But
They stretch way up to like Vermont and all that.
oh yeah. But you gotta, you gotta pay the dues to all the different clubs to ride their trails. It's gotten expensive. It was a
Did
little
you
bit.
form some bonds with those people and snowmobilers? I know you still talk to one right now, Wadey Williams, who runs that particular trail that went right by your house out there.
Well, I never became any part of the clubs when I was up there in those 10 years, because for the first 5 or 6 that I was living there, I didn't have a snowmobile. I was still kind of coming down here and partying in the meadows and things like that, and chasing girls, and just.
Well, you snowmobiled here in East Hampton when you were a kid.
Oh yeah,
growing up.
with my father. Yeah,
Dirt biking.
yeah. My father, I owe a lot to my backwoods route kind of thing.
What kind of dirt bikes did you have? What were the names of some of them?
Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki. I had an old Hadaka.
What kind of Hondas did you have?
I had a CR80, CR125, CR480. I had some big bikes. I had an old vintage Hadaka that my dad got for me. I think that was a 250. And I remember, the only thing I remember about it is it was old. And he had brought it home because I had blown up the modern dirt bike I had, and it was all apart. And I think I was about 15. I couldn't afford, I was trying to save the money to put it together. So my dad brought home this bike from one of his co-workers' kids in the shop that just needed a few little things. But it was like a real vintage thing. And the one thing I remember is it had a chrome gas tank on it. And this thing probably held 5 gallons. It was huge. But the cool thing about it was an on-off road bike. And it had the headlights and the turn signals and all of that stuff on it. And he would, he didn't know this at the time, but going from, racing, doing motocross racing and all the stuff that I was into, which my dad supported me in, and just having flat out, motocross or enduro bikes, this was kind of a neat thing. At first I was like, oh my God, this really blows. I can't ride this bike around. It's, it's a dinosaur, But the one thing I found out, you figure I was 15, 16, I was making girlfriends all over town, and some of them lived way, way across town. So my mother, she'd go to bingo on Wednesday nights. I'd put the headlight on that bike. I'd put a piece of paper with some numbers on the back, and down the road I'd go, because I had all the lights, So that became the big thing. Me and my buddy, we'd jump on the bike, and we'd go out in the country, and we'd go road riding. We had a headlight on the bike, and it looked like a motorcycle. And back in them days, you're lucky if you saw a cop when you're, out in the outskirts somewhere, Although, needless to say, I did get pinched eventually, and the bike came home in the back of a cruiser, and I got my little red wagon cooked, and my bike chained up to the tree for a week. My dad was a hard man,
That brings me to something that made me think of something that I can remember people probably don't know. What's up with this first car thing and something about bucket seats? And how old were you? And
We're
what
not going
happened?
there.
No?
No.
Okay, we won't go there then. Did you have a couple close calls, either on the snowmobile, on the motorcycles, the dirt bikes, in the fields? I mean, did you have a close call on a particular railroad track, perhaps? When you were riding?
Got hurt a lot, yeah. It's how you kind of learn. My father was always a big safety guy. He rode snowmobile. I mean, that guy could have raced professionally. He was really.
I would love to see that, because of course he's older now, and I didn't get the chance to
Oh
see
yeah,
that.
I mean, he was a really.
I can believe it, though.
He was really good. I mean, and he had state-of-the-art sleds in the day. I think he rode the old '70s Cats, but I mean, he would soup them all up and bore them out and change the clutch and rip the tracks out of them. He was quite the guy, right in his garage, old school, And he was always about safety. Use your head, be on the ball. And apparently, I guess I kind of wasn't. I was kind of like my boy when we go bike riding. It's like a little wild puppy off the leash running around having fun. And I remember one day I took off on my dirt bike on I think it was a Sunday afternoon. I got done stacking wood with him for the day. And I said, hey, I'm going to go ride. And he said, sure. And I took off by myself. And that was one thing he always hated. You never ride alone. I'll be fine, And I was just riding the trails, and I come across this big old field, and it had these big swelling.
Is that what they call whoop-de-doos?
No, it was a big old. It was just a hay field, and it had different grades in it. Yeah, it looked like kind of like when Eddie was my son was a child, and he used to watch the Teletubbies, and you see that grassy field with all those
The mounds.
mounds, yeah. And,